So I'm talking with artist Malcolm Taylor today, who's exhibited widely in the British Isles and is currently president of the Manchester Academy of Fine Arts. So hello, Malcolm, good to meet you. And I thought I'd start by just asking you, because it's such a strange time in the world at the moment, what effect, if any, lockdown had on your painting practice? How was lockdown as an artist?
Apart from there being no galleries open, I would say it was fairly positive actually, because obviously, like everyone else in the country, I was locked down, and my studio is only 5 or 6 steps from the back door. Wow. So I was able to amble out and go in my studio most days and do something, even if it's only sitting in the chair looking at the painting on the wall that I'm working on and reading the newspaper.
So if we can go into your background a little bit, how did you first get into being an artist? What was your route in? Has it been a straight line, or has it been quite a curvy line, or
a very wavy line? Yeah, like most people, I guess. I trained as a engineer, a design draftsman actually, and having gone to college for quite a few years, I decided it would be nice, having been used to going to college a couple of days a week in the evenings, to do something else and do something that I wanted to do at college. And I decided to take a sort of a painting for pleasure course, and did that. And that's where it kicked off. I quite enjoyed it, and we moved on from there. I mean, it was very, very basic, copying from things, etc. But then moved on from there and got to know the people in the local art scene and started going to live drawing classes, etc. And it just developed from there. The leap into being more of a full-time artist came at the end of my career, when I was thinking, well, I'm going to stop working and concentrate on painting, which is what I did. When I say stop working, it was a major decision, because I was coming to the end of my work career anyway. So that's really when it took off.
What did you design? What sort of things did you design?
Well, early on I worked as a railway engineer. I was designing lots of railway infrastructure. And later on, I ended up working for a company called Arup, or some people know it as Old Arup, which is probably one of the biggest design companies in the world. The prestigious job that they always mention is they designed the Sydney Opera House, so that's one. Right. Lots of building.
That's a big one.
Yeah, I was leading the sort of the rail design business, the rail design teams. So that's how I got from there to here.
So that's so with a very sort of strong background in design, would you say that still feeds into your work? Looking at the painting behind you, it looks quite designed.
Get away from straight lines to curved lines, possibly, if that's the way of putting it. But there was certainly discipline instilled, and just getting on with it. You've got to produce something, design something. But I think the last 10 years of my working career, I was just itching to go and paint. But of course, you've got to have the income as well. So there's a jump from doing that to actually being comfortable enough to just do it.
So if you think back when you were doing design work, was there ever a feeling that you wished you would be a fine artist, actually be able to paint rather than work as a designer, or was it just quite an interesting trajectory that felt quite comfortable?
No, there's a point, I think, halfway between starting and finishing work and taking the plunge, about halfway, which would have been probably the wrong choice, when I was quite keen to just do it. But again, when with a family, it's not that easy. So yes, there was a point there, partway along, when I nearly did it, and then I didn't, and then I left it a while, and did it when it was right for me.
So the thing that I found, so I've been looking at your work on Instagram, as you know, and what I find really fascinating about your work is, well, a number of things, but one thing that's really noticeable is the way you do representational work and abstract. And I mean, I know some other artists do that, or they've moved from one to the other, but you've got both going on. So how does that work for you? So do you go into the studio and think it's abstract day to day, or it's figurative work today, or how does that fit together?
You may not believe this, but when I go into my studio and start painting, I have no idea what I'm going to paint until
That sounds wonderful. Yeah.
it starts to develop. And sometimes more figurative work comes out, and of late it's going more and more abstract. But also from sketchbooks as well, and from the influence of other artists. You might see something and think, that looks good, and then that will trigger you off in another direction. But from sketchbooks, I keep a sketchbook where I draw people, and keep a sketchbook which is more doodles and abstract work, and a few landscape ones in other books. But the sketchbooks do influence you, so you can. I think you'll have a flick through them of an evening or something. I think, oh, I'll do something on that line tomorrow, and just go with it. But people seem to be very surprised that you do landscape and figurative work. There's no comparison here between me and this artist, but if you take someone like Richard Dibencorn, or Dibencorn, however you want to pronounce it, you look at his work, and he did very abstract work, and very figurative work, and people as well, portraits of people. But nobody ever queries that. So I don't find it unusual. I find it more unusual that people will just stick to doing, how can I say, landscape work that people can recognise and know where it is, etc.
Do you think that's coming from the artist sometimes, or coming from pressure from the gallery?
That is a good point, because certain galleries, it depends where you are. If you're in London, or if you're in Manchester, or if you're in Glasgow, wherever, there's a different sort of art scene, and London is quite comfortable with quite abstract work. I would say in the Manchester area, not as much. Galleries do influence it. If a gallery says, and galleries do say, "I'd like to show your work," etc. But they particularly want a particular type of work. There's one gallery that shows my work in the past, and they're more interested in the boaty type paintings, because they are on the seashore and the sea themselves. But I try and not let that influence me as I'm painting. If somebody wants something, I might say, well, you might like this one or that one, rather than paint one specially.
So do you have a preference? I mean, I think I read on your website you're painting increasingly in an abstract way, and having been influenced by the St. Ives tradition. So is that fueled by looking at their work, or your own visits to St. Ives and Cornwall, or just a feeling of going more abstract? How you?
No, I think the St. Ives influence is just by going there and seeing the work that the artists do, and having done that for many years. Since my children were small, we went, and we've been going, not every year, but continuously over the last 30 years or so.
So are there any artists that have particularly influenced your work as well? So you're doing a lot of seascape influenced art, and would you say that it's particularly landscape and seascape artists that have influenced you, or not?
That influence is for many years.
Have you got a few? Yeah.
Well,
and have they changed?
Oh yes, they do change. I could probably write a book. The sort of the northern art when I first started was an influence, but I've gone away from that now. If you live in the part of the country that I am, people like Lowry and Theodore Major, etc. I don't know if you know Theodore Major. He's a very he good artist. He exhibited with Lowry, but he went his own way. And he influenced me in the beginning because he lived not far from me, and he was quite open to people going and having a chat with him. So he used to do that, welcome you in. He wasn't very keen on galleries and people who were trying to buy his paintings, etc., just get around the back. But he was an initial influence. But going on from there, Tide was a big turning point for me. We first went down there with a gang of us, about 5 of us, with wives and children and everything. And we went to the School of Painting there, and we painted, and the others did what they wanted.
So the St Ives School of Painting.
Yeah, that's going back probably. My son's 44, and he was in a pushchair. So
was that the Porthmeor programme, the year?
Yeah. It's not. There's no such thing as a Porthmeor programme then, but that was the same venue. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You said your work you've been doing more and more abstract in the last few years.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, could you see a time maybe when you're almost always doing abstract work? Are you personally wanting to go more abstract, or finding that you
the answer to that is yes. It's definitely that stage. I normally do abstract. You mentioned the picture behind me, which is abstract, but it's got a landscape body image about it as well. And that's the sort of work that I'm doing now. A lot of my work, and people say this to me, even though I don't realise it myself, to say another boat painting or there's boats in it, and say, where, and the shapes of they just appear. It's like a natural way of drawing or painting or doodling, really, in the painting that while you're painting something, and then things get left in there. And then you do a few like that, and you think, oh, that's okay, so I'll go in that direction. Well, that's not the same. That's not the same with figures. Figures tend to start off. Well, they always start off as figures.
Have you got any idea why you're painting more abstract forms?
That's a difficult question. Have any more? I just like the freedom of it.
Yeah.
I think that's the simple answer. I just like the freedom of it, and the journey. You don't know where you're going to go, and I just like to see where they end up. That's the right word.
So I've noticed that you use, and in that painting as well, you use some amazingly, some lovely kind of mid-oranges and greys and the pale blues.
Yeah.
Have you got some favourite colours? I mean, do you find that your favourite colours go in you'll have a little series where you absolutely love certain colours and then you move through them, or are you quite faithful to your favourite colours?
The answer to that is yes. You do have periods when you're my favourite colours. At one time, my paintings were very warm, very autumnal. Lots of browns and oranges and greens, etc. Green doesn't come into my paintings a great deal at all now, I don't think. Not deliberately. I mean, it does. But they've gone cooler, more greys, more blues, reds. You're also my favourite colour, and I'm tempted to say black. I think it was André Matisse that said black is the queen of all colours. And the reason is because I do a lot of work in my paintings with charcoal and tend to leave it there, the drawing and scribbling and mapping out. And I think if you look over that one, you're looking over there, there's a black bit in that one. It just gives the painting some punch. So I do like to use black, and I like to use red and blue. So those are my 3 colours that tend to, but red's very limited. It might only just be a dot here or there, a splash here or there. But that's the easiest answer I can give you. My favourite colours. They've moved from browns and oranges and greens to more blacks and blues and greys and white as well, white doors and also painting.
So it's quite interesting that. Does that affect, I mean, is that reflected in anything like your clothes as well, or any other aspect of life, or is it just in your palette?
I think it's just in my palette. I think my clothes are quite drab. just looking.
It's not about the fashion, it's about the art.
No, just it's. Yeah, I was talking to my daughter a week or two ago, and I said I need to get some, you know, a couple of new jumpers or whatever. And she said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I look in my wardrobe, and they're all greys and blues, and nothing very bright in there at all." So that answers your question in that respect.
Yeah. And I guess another thing I was wondering was what is your process? As an example, if you give
Sometimes the painting, possibly along behind me, maybe 2-3 weeks or so, but that's because I painted so far and then you just left it there, left it to fester, and then talk to me a little bit, you know, and I just look at it and I think, I don't know what I'm doing with that, and then suddenly you get out of the chair and put a few new brush strokes in. But the process itself are usually a quick, well, obviously prime the thing and put maybe a few base colours in here and there, but then the charcoal comes out and I scribble the sort of map, a rough outline of what I'm trying to do, or nothing that's preconsidered, just plonk it in.
But do you have something in mind? Do you have something in mind, like a sea scene or a landscape?
Not normally, sometimes, but I tend to have maybe map out colours in my mind, what I'm thinking of doing, and how I want the big blocks to go here and there. But the seascape keeps popping up. Landscapes do as well sometimes, especially from my studio at the back. There's just farmers' fields, so sometimes the light on the fields gives you a push in one direction. And you may think it's lovely light and I'll try and do something like that. It doesn't usually end up like that, but it's a start of something. And that might go in a completely different direction. It's usually landscapish and trying to keep it loose.
It's one of those interesting things when you're, I mean, I think all artists are influenced by other artists. How did you personally manage to find your own voice through those influences?
I have no idea about that. I think most of the answers are happy accidents, but I think just keep on painting and you develop your own voice that way. And you just settle down into your own little groove.
So just keep painting and it takes its time.
Yeah, it takes its time, it takes its toll as well. Yeah. But I think, yeah, eventually people can see my paintings and recognise it's painted by me, which is nice. Whereas at one time they could say, "Oh, that's, you know, you can see the influence of somebody on that." Probably still can now, but I think the influence is more of a mongrel influence with lots of different artists involved rather than maybe one or two.
And how long did that? How long would you say that took to get to a point where you felt people were saying, "Ah, that's a Malcolm Taylor"? I
don't forget that in all, when I say I've been painting a long time, but it's only in, let's consider the last dozen years or so, you know, when I've really been painting properly. I don't know about properly, it's not the right word. When I've been painting regularly.
Yeah. So is that about a dozen years?
Probably. But before that, all that dozen years, yeah, it's honed into where I am now, really.
So you're based in the Northwest.
Yes.
And you're current president of the Manchester Academy of Fine Arts. So okay. What does that entail? When did you get appointed, and what does that entail?
I'm only in my second year as a president. Manchester Academy of Fine Art has been going nearly as long as the Royal Academy of Art. It was established in 1859, so we just had our 160th anniversary. And I'm the 24th president in that time, so it's not been a great deal. We do a lot of work with Manchester Art University, Manchester University with the art department there. And we do things with the graduates. We try and give a prize each year at the graduate exhibition. And we're moving closer and closer to working with Manchester University, the School of Art. So that takes a bit of time as well. And also is usually setting up exhibitions and things like that. It's pretty much on the same basis as other societies like the Royal Birmingham Society or the Royal West of England Art Society.
Yeah.
We haven't got the royal behind our name. I think we're too, I don't know. I won't venture into that one.
Right, I was going to give you a few shorts as well. We've covered this a little bit, but if you had to pick one, what's your favourite colour?
Blue.
Any particular type of blue?
Cobalt blue is a lovely colour.
Cobalt blue, okay. Favourite medium to paint in?
Favourite medium may not be painting. I like doing collage, and I've been doing quite bits of collage recently. I just like playing around with collage. It's quite nice to do. Favourite medium in painting, there's got to be acrylic, although I'm a member of the Pastel Society, and my paintings, when I do them, and this is not a one-word answer, I'm sorry, but my paintings are usually labelled mixed media rather than oil or acrylic or whatever. When I started, I was like everyone else, they start off in oil painting. I just found that well, the way I paint, I found it going muddy sometimes, doing too much, overworking them, and also it takes such a long time to dry before you can do something else with them. So my mediums are acrylic and pastel. But when I do pastel, I tend to do either pure pastel as a painting, but I use pastel in most of my paintings, making marks, and then I fix it in and leave it there.
So what do you fix it with? Just like a satin varnish, or?
Yeah, something like that, a varnish or whatever. I use a spray fixative at first, and then once it's in place, you can varnish it with the rest of the painting at the end.
That's interesting. So do you use pastel actually and then cover it with layers of acrylic, or do you use pastel at the end?
No, I just leave it be. If it's part of the painting, it's part of the painting. So sometimes I just might want a zip of orange or something like that, and the appropriate pastel will give it you immediately. Those are the two main mediums, but even collage sometimes goes into my acrylic paintings. And I call them mixed media because there's pencil marks in them, bits of scribbling drawing in them, there's charcoal in them, there's pastel, but 90% of them is acrylic paint, but there's still bits of other things in there.
Do you have a favourite painting tool?
Scraper, like a spatula type scraper. Probably that, and maybe something that, like a screwdriver, you can scratch into the paint if you want to make some marks.
And if you had to pick, abstract or figurative?
Can I say somewhere in between?
Semi-abstract. So do you mean that by that you don't just think in shapes and patterns, rather you take it rather than from reality, or it lands up somewhere in between?
It lands up somewhere in between, yes. I might start completely abstract, and then a shade will come, and I think, oh, that looks like, I'll make it, let it go if it's looking like a bolt or whatever. Don't resist is the answer, I think.
And canvas or panel?
Well, either panel or paper or card, Canvas is, when I say, I'm talking about maybe small stuff in collages and things like that when I say card. But paper I can do work on maybe in gouache or acrylic, if it's a nice thick paper. But I don't work on canvas. I find them a bit too much giving them for me. My technique isn't very giving.
Do you like working big or small?
Getting bigger.
Yeah.
As my body goes slimmer, my paintings are getting bigger.
There's an inverse correlation then.
You get to a point when they get to such a size that you get agoraphobia, you know, there's so much space on it, you just think, no, I'm lost here, you know, it needs to come in a bit.
Are there any particular marks that you are aware that you do really like to put on your paint, even if they're hidden, they're in there?
You might find, when you look at a lot of my work, there's like something like a slice of melon, you know, little half moon shape.
Are you particularly fond of melon?
No, I do like to put scratch marks in some paintings as well.
So is that usually quite slow and deliberate, or is it sometimes quite
half and half, I would say. Not manic.
Yeah.
Although I could be manic sometimes. Generally speaking, it needs to be fairly quick and definite, rather than shilly-shally.
And how do you feel when you are painting?
I'm usually listening to the radio or whatever, and other influences coming around, and just crack on with painting. I think the better question is, how do you feel the day after you've been painting all day? Because you feel whacked.
Yeah.
Whacked, yeah, sometimes. Especially the older you get, you know, the more tiring it is on you. And standing, I stand up as I paint all the time. I never sit, I can't paint sat down. I have to work on the wall, and I paint in that manner.
So do you have that urge to be seen?
Oh yeah, I must be an exhibitionist. Yeah, I like showing my work in gallery. Otherwise, it just piles up. You know, you know, it's nice to.
Yeah, it's a storage problem, isn't it?
I feel much better if I paint each day or in myself. So it's a difficult question. That I'm not too sure what drives you. A friend of mine, who's now dead, unfortunately, but he had a great saying. He said it takes two people to paint a painting. He said one to apply the paint, and the other to hit him on the head when it's finished.
Yeah.
Usually it's the natural break in what you're doing to go and do something else, go and have a meal, go to bed and come back the next morning or whatever, that tells you it's finished.